Whilst RFK is controversial to quite a number of people, there are some important things that have happened around his tenure at the CDC. One of them being that for people who have been challenging the consensus, it is far easier to speak, and the censorship has not been as significant. Now, for some people who don't like going outside of that narrative, that can be a problem. And so today, what we're doing is I'm having a chat with Dr. Shetty to understand a little bit more about his views as to what the implications would be if this was to happen. Let's get Dr. Shetty in just a minute. Hi, Shankara. How are you today? Thank you very
Hi,
much for
Philip.
joining me. Just a quick introduction for our audience before we get any further.
I'm Dr. Shankara Chetty. I reside in South Africa, Port Edward. I'm a natural science biologist and a general medical practitioner that took an interest in COVID and became controversial. But we're looking at everything that we can do to turn the tide.
Excellent. Now, listen, what has caught my attention, which is what I wanted to talk to you about, is this story that was broken by Robert Malone. And for people who don't know, Robert Malone is the guy who had the concept of mRNA vaccines and then was not liked by the industry because he challenged the outcomes. Then he got involved in the ACIP, which is to do with vaccine research and decisions. And then he was removed or he left it. And so then he has a lot of close connections with Robert RFK. And so when he put out this message in the past few days, it caught my attention. And essentially, this is what he said. I'll just show you this here on the screen. Breaking news based on the rumor mill currently with specifics from senior USG government employees. RFK Jr. will be leaving as secretary of HSS in July after the 4th. The meeting was apparently held last Monday, and Dr. Oz will head the transition team. And he went on to say it was reported widely and openly discussed during last Wednesday's congressional baseball game. There will be a lot of people who are happy with this, Shankara. What is your view?
I think he was a very controversial person, Philip, for the right reasons. He was willing to ask the tough questions. He was willing to challenge the narrative. And look, he was brought into the Trump presidency because Trump wouldn't have won the presidency without him. So it had nothing to do with his skills as a HSS secretary. It was that he is a popular person and he has a big following. And I think that following is because of his controversial nature, willing to challenge everything that's in front of him. And of course, we witnessed what's happened with COVID and what's happened with the medical fraternity. And of course, we were wishing for someone like that would actually come in and rock the boat. At the end of the day, we need people to awaken the public. And we could see that we talk of bipartisan support for nonsense and who's going to challenge it. And so I was quite happy that he came in. We actually had a voice, even though we might not agree with everything he says. He gave us a voice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Is that I certainly as well saw that the censorship was quite horrific at some stages of the pandemic. You literally couldn't talk about the science without getting targeted. And bringing someone like him in allowed the conversations. It no longer became just misinformation. It was actually, let's talk about the science. You may disagree with my position, whatever, but at least we could talk about the science. Now, some people would argue that it has allowed it to go too far the other way, where people are just making up stuff and saying stuff that actually isn't in the interest of the public. Any thoughts about that?
Philip, I think we're well aware that there were interests that governed healthcare for a long time. Pharmaceutical interests, industrial interests in the food and chemical industry, military interests, political groups. So the health industry's been under a huge a blanket of control by many different facets of society. Now, looking at it from that perspective, Robert Kennedy had a huge job to do in coming in and trying to fix all the problems that we had. And remember, all the interests were not in the best interests of good health and public health care. There were commercial interests. There were many other interests driving this. And so I think with Robert Kennedy coming in, yes, he was controversial. People had he had views on certain things that I don't agree with, and certain people might not. But at the end of the day, it's to have a clear opposition to the general narrative that was out there. And the general narrative seemed to be censored. Even Robert Kennedy, in his presidential campaign, was censored when he spoke about the science. He had a difficult time trying to get his perspective out there. And he's sticks and stones, Philip. But I can't understand why we couldn't say what we needed to say, why we can't look at the science. And at the end of the day, a lot of what he said and what we discussed was proven to be true. A lot of the institutions, regulatory bodies that's supposed to be protecting us were shown to have failed in what they have done. So, yeah, at the end of the day, we need that voice. We need the controversy. You see, Philip, the way I see it, we the people have been broken apart and we can't form cultures and communities anymore. But it seems like government has formed a culture and community, a gang on its own. And so the only way to solve the problem is to make sure they always fight with each other, and we'll get more done that way. So Robert Kennedy was actually someone that was bringing the fight to the politics of what's going on around us.
I'm going to show you an interesting article that has come out from Harvard School of Public Health. They did a poll where they said the trust in the CDC has fallen dramatically in the last year. This was published on the 9th of June, so just a few days ago. And essentially, they said while support remains strong for childhood vaccine requirements, the public doesn't seem to support what the decisions are happening at the moment. So it says only 50% of US adults say they trust public health recommendations from the CDC compared to 77% in spring of 2025. And this was using about 2,200 US adults over the age of 18. And I think that the impression they are saying, or that what they're trying to highlight, is that this has occurred largely because RFK is in position. So he is damaging public trust. My question is the opposite way. Is it that he has revealed what has happened in the pandemic, which is why the public no longer trusts the CDC? Which one is it?
I think the opinions that the CDC expressed over the last few years, Philip, are not the fruits of Robert Kennedy's actions. Since he's come in, he's exposed a lot, and I think since in the last year, a lot's come out about the vaccine harms. A lot's come out about the illogic behind childhood vaccination schedules. He's challenged a lot of different. He's challenged the food pyramid. He's challenged glyphosate. Since he's come in, he's challenged a lot of different things. But in doing so, Philip, a lot of what the CDC, FDA put out as gospel truth has been shown to be false. And so, if confidence has fallen in the CDC, it is because they've been exposed as the frauds that they've been. And now and the thing is, with Robert Kennedy, it's a huge ship to turn around. And so I understand the mammoth task he faces. Because remember, the culture at the CDC is not something that started overnight. It's been bred over a generation. And it's going to be hard to root out that kind of mindset and propaganda that's infiltrated these organizations.
Just showing you here a comment. This is from Insight 9354. Lots of numbers. RFK has been a great disappointment. And somebody else has said here, RFK Jr. didn't do anything but keep the original plans and agendas going. Are they being too harsh?
Look, Philip, I think there has to be an understanding of the game, the nature of the game that he's stepped into. These kind of things, the things that he wants to do, you might want to do those things, but the framework that's in place doesn't allow you to. Like I said, a lot of these institutions that are regulatory have been captured over generations. They have a sort of agenda that permeates the entire departments. Now, if you look at the interests at play, you've got the pharmaceutical industry that's pushing in one direction. You've got the industry that industry is pushing with the food and chemical products. You've got the military, and that's looking into bioweapons and chemtrails and a whole host of other things that come to play. You've got the political agenda at play. And then you've got the control by the regulatory bodies, the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, the training institutions. They dictate what they will teach, very restrictive curricula. They suppress robust debate. You got to capture the research control, the journals. They publish articles that were false and had to be retracted. They don't publish articles that are in the best public interest. They find non scientific ways of stopping publications through irrelevant peer review processes. We've got medical regulatory registration councils that determine who will be registered and not registered. So it's a huge framework that needs to be dismantled if we're going to achieve anything. So sometimes trying to fix it might not be the best way forward. Allowing it to dismantle itself through its own reckless behavior might be the way to go and rebuild something new from scratch. So with Robert, he's trying to fix something that's taken years to build in the wrong way, and every cog plays a part in it. So sometimes I think it might be better to destroy what we have and rebuild systems from scratch with the right moral compass from the start.
The one thing that I think about that I wish had been done, and if I had been able to speak to him at the this is what I would have said. Where the answer is going to lie, especially beyond the pandemic, is to do with autopsies. Everything is an opinion until you've got tissue pathology.
Yeah.
And I would have pushed him to try and get as many post pandemic, especially in vaccinated cohorts, autopsies to try and explain why so many people are getting sick. And I think that if he does leave or if he's pushed, whichever one, and this has not been done, I am not sure if we are anywhere better off after 2 years without something quite tangible to hold on to. Any thoughts on that?
Philip, I think he's been trying. I've been part of the Children's Health Defense team here in South Africa. The reason I joined it seemed a decent way to actually challenge things. There was a voice. They gave us a voice. And as well, I've met a few of Robert's people that he sent around looking at what's been achieved around the pandemic, dealing with spike protein, vaccine injuries, long COVID. So there's been an acceptance of these kind of things that are happening. And of course, Philip, we've been part of Rapid, a team that came together impromptu from looking at the pandemic and all the things we discovered along the way. And he's shown some interest in the work that we've been doing. So I think there's a definite will to actually fix the problem, but there's a problem in admitting the problem with the powers that might be. And so he walks a tightrope. Like someone said, they threw him into a pond of alligators and gave him a stick to defend himself. So yeah, let's show some mercy for the man.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I appreciate what has happened over the past few years, where you're able to quite objectively and more openly talk about things. In days gone by, you couldn't even talk about embalmers clots, this, these kind of things that are happening that nobody's interested in. I recently looked at this paper the Japanese did on multiple microscarring in the heart. Probably in days of censorship that wouldn't even have been published. Well, nobody is going to cite it, but at least it's published. And so it's likely to have an impact on researchers doing some of the difficult research, because when because what we may see coming back is very, very active, avid censorship, because now they know exactly who is willing to speak and challenge the narrative. So this is the reality where the voices mainstream consensus. I doubt that's in the best interest of the population. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Philip, I look. I think the problem is that the public have been awakened. We've gone too far down this road to turn back. I think the narrative around COVID, the suppression of our rights, the way it's changed the way the world works is clearly visible to a lot of people. Here in South Africa, there is an awakening as to what's happened. So I think, with who runs the agenda, with what we call the globalists and the elites, they know that the time is short and they got to push. And the more they push, the more we see. And so the world is changing. They're not going to go back to censorship. People know what that's about. Look at the loss of trust in the CDC. So the CDC might be the loudest voice, but people will choose who they listen to. And so, yeah, we marked. I think with what happened in COVID, I think the illogic and stupidity of the way they ran the pandemic showed us that have a little bit of critical and logical thought to be the sore thumbs in their agenda, so they know who to target going forward. But I guess we did it because we're fearless, and they must bring it on. At the end of the day, Philip, we've been here for our patients, and we must just keep doing that. Whatever transpires in the interim, uh, yeah, I guess we will have to let it break and build new systems. I don't see how to fix it.
One of the things I've been looking at is, because I have anticipated the issues that would happen to the population, I've been studying post pandemic health trends, and across every organ system, we are seeing really unusual changes. I don't think it's easy to hide that, because at the end of the day, people are still getting sick and want answers. Doctors still have to work with these sick patients. And there is nothing more frustrating than seeing a patient and having no idea what is wrong with them, how to help them. It is like one of the worst things to happen from a clinical point of view. What at this point are you seeing on the ground?
Well, Philip, I just wanted to say we're seeing some very unusual things that we've never seen before as clinicians. And what I find very strange is that those people who purported to be the experts at the start of the pandemic can't seem to give me any answers as to the unusual things I'm seeing. They seem to be very silent right now about the unusual things. If these unusual things are so common, why aren't the specialists and super specialists standing around and explaining to me why this is happening? Why is it left to me to explain to them why it is happening? I mean, I had a patient contacting me from a hospital, an ordinary patient, Philip, whose husband had an ultrasound and it showed microscopic areas of ischemic injury. And she turned around and said, "That looks like microvascular clots." And the doctors refused to believe her. And so she contacted me. So, yeah, at the end of the day, we're seeing some very unusual things, Philip. And I don't think that they understand the gravity of having a global immune dysregulation, an immune clotting issue. It's affecting a broad diversity of the population. And so you can ask anyone. People are suffering with the flu for 2 months, struggling to get over it. Doctors are not seeing that it's dysregulating immunity, causing gut problems, causing microvascular clotting issues until it's too late. So, yeah, we're in that period of what I'd call the Third World War, where we in that phase where uh, it's a slow kill. We all know someone that died unexpectedly. We all have our suspicions about why that happened. Unfortunately, the people in control refuse to investigate what is blatantly obvious. And it's only till we get that done will we be able to save lives and improve the health of our patients. But of course, the regulations and the regulatory bodies seem to have lost the plot, or they had a different plot from the start.
One of the things that I'm hoping to be able to speak with Gert again soon, and I think that a lot of people have underestimated what he had been warning about. And I keep on saying to people is that some time frames are very difficult to be specific about. But his prediction about highly evasive Omicron variants, I suspect is already here. It's just that it's not presenting with severe disease. Where would you put that kind of thinking at this point? Because for the vast majority of the world, they just think this is done. COVID is gone. It was the past. And we are doing a historical reflection on the pandemic rather than real world active science to figure out how this is impacting the health of the population.
Yeah, Philip, I think Gert was right. He still is. But we could be, I think where we lose it a little. This was developed in a lab, so it's not a natural evolution of a virus, but it follows that natural evolutionary process. Remember, the virus wasn't the primary pathogen of COVID illness; it was spike protein, right? So the pathology that we're going to see is not going to be caused by the virus; it's going to be caused by the spread of spike protein and how that spread. So what we're looking at is, under normal circumstances, if you vaccinate with a vaccine like we have that is non-sterilizing, then you will get more and more contagious variants. And then once you get the most contagious variant, then you get selection for stronger and stronger pathology, those variants that can cause more disease. And that's what Gert was concerned about, that it would eventually evolve into a variant that has far more higher ability to cause death. But the spike protein is the trigger for a lot of the pathology we see. So the virus has become far more contagious. But the viral illness itself is not what's killing people still. It's still the reaction to the spike protein and exposure. And that constant change through the pandemic with the different variants seem to have exposed different cohorts to severe disease. In the first wave, we had the respiratory, the second, the gastrointestinal, and then we also noticed different populations around the world being affected by the different variants. So now we're sitting with a far more contagious variant that will deliver spike protein generally to a broader population. And of course, we have to start looking at how they react and who has these adverse immune dysregulations and clotting events. So, because we didn't look at it, Philip, and didn't look at the genetics behind why certain populations were being affected, like I said from the beginning, we should have looked at blood groups and things like that to select out who's getting affected with each variant. Now we're sitting with a contagious variant that's affecting everyone, and some people have severe disease, and it's not necessarily those with comorbidities. It's those that might be genetically predisposed. So yeah, we missed a huge boat. And the only reason that people are not seeing that there's more COVID circulating today than there ever was is that we stopped testing, and so people think it's just a flu. And I think the stopping of testing, well, I guess if we continue testing, we would have realized the vaccine didn't work. Maybe that's the reason they stopped testing. But a lot of the viruses circulating at the moment are variants of the COVID virus.
So one of the things that I say is that the flu tends to be pretty clear. You know, you have your sore throat, your runny nose, aching muscles, and so on. You pretty know well when you have a flu. But what a lot of people are having are viral symptoms. And what's interesting is that when you actually prod them, they sometimes say, "Yeah, I thought it was a virus, but I wasn't sure if it was the flu." The symptoms are just different. What I'm noticing is primarily the headache and the fatigue. Literally, that's it, nothing more.
Yeah.
And then it only is there for a few days, and then 2 weeks later, they get very sick.
Yeah, the headache and fatigue, Philip. We know that Omicron is neurotropic. So I also, besides seeing patients present with a headache as the initial symptom, I also see patients presenting with neuropathic symptoms. Some people present with dorsal root pain, reemergence of their sciatic pain, and then suddenly a day later they got a sore throat. So it shows the virus is neurotropic. And then, of course, patients get a sore throat. They don't have the usual symptoms. A lot of them develop gut upset. A lot of them develop unusual symptoms. Uh, every patient that I see, Philip, with the flu, now that we have a circulating bioweapon, call it by the name it was made. It's not a flu anymore. So when you get a flu shot, it's not the flu shot that you thought about. It's actually the flu. That was the bioweapon. So when you get the flu, you don't take it lightly. You never know what might transpire. So every patient that I see with the flu, I explain to them that I expect to see a complete recovery in a reasonable space of time. Complete, 100%. If there's any sudden worsening, any new symptoms, any change in a direction away from recovery, they must present back immediately. Because we still know it's a biphasic illness. In some patients, it'll just be a viral illness and it'll pass with absolutely no effect. In those patients where there's new symptoms, worsening, or lingering of a symptom, they've had some kind of dysregulation that needs to be reset. And if we don't get those patients, they'll take 2 months to get better. But if we catch them timeously and change the way we address it, because we know it's no more a virus and it's an immune dysregulation or a microvascular coagulation or a persistence in the gut, we clear those issues away and then they recover timeously. So, yeah, I think it requires retraining, Philip. Yeah, a new understanding of the progression of this kind of pathophysiology. It is not the typical viral pathophysiology that we see. And it affects multiple systems because it seems to have an immune predisposition. When you look at what we see, Philip, why would a person's heart be targeted and the rest of them is perfectly fine? Why would a person's liver be targeted and the rest of them perfectly fine? So yeah, there's things we need to be looking into. And unfortunately, like we said with what's happening with Robert Kennedy, there's so many fingers in the pot that yeah, the direction gets dictated by other means. What is important in research for the saving of lives doesn't seem to be the agenda of the regulatory authorities that we're tasked with protecting those lives.
Absolutely. So listen, Shankar, as we do a short closeout, because we hopefully will be talking far more regularly. When we think back to the challenge that we are facing now, and the fact that someone who has championed open science and is willing to go against the narrative may be leaving that position, because just in case, I want the audience to be aware, what we're talking about when we say this is that, I'll just show them the main point here. This was by Robert Malone on the 12th of June. Very active rumor mill with the specifics from senior government employees that RFK Jr. will be leaving. We don't know if he'll be pushed or if he's stepping out as Secretary of HSS in July after the 4th. And Dr. Oz will head the transition team. And similar to quite a few people who have stepped aside, Tulsi Gabbard has stepped aside for whatever reason, you are seeing this kind of transition happening. And our point was, what impact will this have on science, especially COVID science, and the kind of work that needs to be done in order to protect the population? Final thoughts, Shankara.
I think, Philip, uh, when I look at what Robert has done, he's provided a platform for us to awaken the public to different points of view, to look at research more critically, not believe everything that comes out. But I think, as well as a political figure, he can do far more in the politics of the country rather than just as the health secretary. So maybe it was an agenda to put Dr. Oz in and give more credibility, because when Robert Kennedy speaks, everyone wants to know if he's a doctor. But then I've got patients telling me more than doctors know. And so I think at the end of the day, they might be putting Dr. Oz in to get a bit more credibility to what the views that he's expressed are. Uh, at the end of the day, as long as he keeps that loud hailer going and uses it the way it was meant to, he's been giving us a voice, and he should keep doing that. I respect all the people that have critical views. At the end of the day, we have the same moral compass. We all want the same for humanity. How we get there might be through different routes, but the moral base is always the same. And so, yeah, I'm grateful to people that challenge the narrative. I think at the end of the day, it is the challenge to those narratives in a playful, non confrontational, innocent way that will show us the direction for going forward in future.
Wonderful, Shankara. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the people who are with us now. Thank you for all your comments. And we look forward to bringing you more information, more interesting topics and stories, and critically more clinical insights in the near future. Thanks again, Shankara. Everyone have a good evening.